Aren't you being asked about getting married yet? Basin frowned, caught off guard by Jinchi's question. It was plain to see. Basin's mother had been Jinchi's nursemaid, so he was well acquainted with her. She was a woman forceful enough that Gaoshan sometimes described his own wife as a scary lady. Basin paled and began sweating profusely, even trembling. Jinchi seemed to have provoked some bad memories. I have been well encouraged to go to some arranged meetings. With upstanding young ladies, I'm sure, Jinchi said. His expression did not change, but inwardly he grinned. The questions had all been coming his way lately. It was fun to be on the giving end for once. You were at least shown portraits of them. Yes, I was willing to look if nothing more, Basin said. Perhaps that was wise. A picture could easily improve upon reality. One could very well be talked into a meeting on false pretenses. After that, the other side might try to claim Basin was committed. Basin was who he was and quite hard-headed. Once a relationship like that had been established, he would probably feel responsible to the woman for the rest of his life. Basin's brow furrowed as he looked conflicted. He cast his eyes down and stared at his bandaged right hand. After a long moment he said, I am still so inexperienced. I think it may be a little soon for me to be thinking about women. It was a truly pathetic pronouncement, but as Jinchi watched Basin, he regretted teasing his friend. Is that still bothering you? He asked. Basin did not say anything. Jinchi knew Basin's discomfort around women had something to do with his mother and his older sister. And in a way, Jinchi as well. Basin's mother spent all her time tending Jinchi. Because of this, Basin was looked after by his sister, who was 2 years older than him and a serving woman. It is practically a child's job to beg, plead, and indulge his own desires. But things were a little different with Basin. Sometimes a warrior in battle would transcend mere training. In a moment of crisis, his enemy's movements might appear slow, or he might seem immune to pain. Usually these powers came from years of training as a warrior, but Basin seemed to have been born with his. Was it simply luck, or did it result from being the son of a family with a military history spanning centuries? Basin's abilities could only be called instinctive. Once, when Basin was determined to see his mother, those abilities had been turned upon his sister and the serving woman. Usually they were able to talk him down from his tantrums, but not that time. With his child's hand, small and red like a maple leaf, Basin grabbed his sister's arm and broke it. He was only 6 years old at the time, and he also broke one of his own fingers in the process. He was so strong that the kickback from his own action was powerful. Because of that incident, Basin began to live separately from his older sister and brother. Jinchi first met him shortly after that. He initially considered him a rather cold and distant person. Of course he was. Jinchi had all but stolen his mother from him. That they were to be instructed in swordsmanship together was partly to foster closeness between them. It was also an act of mercy toward Basin. Jinchi first heard this story when he was more than 10 years old. Gaoshan had seen him teasing Basin for trying to keep his distance from the ladies in waiting. Women are such fragile creatures, Basin said. I think it is too soon for me. What could Jinchi say to that? There was nothing he could say. Instead, he held out his cup, silently asking for more juice. Chapter 6, The La Clan, Part 1. Are we sure about this? Maomao thought as she sipped her tea. Being too familiar with something could be dangerous. It lessened your awareness of potential threats. I suppose this counts as a warm welcome, Lahan said, also sipping some tea. A stony-faced man sat across the table from them with his arms folded. Now, my dear brother, Lahan continued. If he was to be believed, the man facing them was his older brother. He was of medium build and not very tall. His features were somewhat undistinguished, and that seemed to be all there was to him. Thinking about it, Lahan had said the eccentric strategist had adopted him. However, Lahan never said he didn't have other siblings. Maomao had simply assumed. Lahan had brought them to an estate not far from the boat landing, close enough to walk. Rikusen had gotten off the boat with them, but Lahan had given him a look that said, I'm not so sure about bringing strangers along. Rikusen was now at an inn near the landing. Maomao thought she could have continued home with Duo and consort Lishu, but that wasn't to be. As for the endlessly cheerful Kokyu, he said he was going to find a carriage to take him to the capital. If fate allowed, they would meet again. The The house they were going to was not in a town. It was located somewhere off by itself. It was a reasonably sumptuous house, but it was simply sitting out in the countryside. Perhaps a high official from the capital had been banished to this place. It would be humiliating for someone of that rank. Maomao wondered if it was really all right for them to just drop in somewhere like this. She could see crop fields all around. Small houses dotted the landscape in the distance beyond them. They were too far apart to constitute a village. The crop growing in the fields was something Maomao did not see much of. It looked similar to bindweed, but bindweed was considered a weed. This was because it rarely produced fruit. But this, whatever it was, covered a large area. They wondered what it could be. Just as they were going to the house, they passed a man on the road. He gave them a stricken look, then led them to a nearby shed. They were now inside that shed. The tea was simple enough. The kettle had been right there and they had simply borrowed it. It hadn't smelled funny, so it was probably safe to use. The tea tasted unusual though, most likely something that had been roasted. The place appeared to be a small workshop supporting the fieldwork. The neatly arranged farm implements spoke to the owner's meticulous nature. "Why are you here?" the man demanded. "Why? Can't your little brother come for a visit?" Maomao suspected they were really here because Lahan had smelled money. "Is Dad around? I'd like to talk to him." "Dad, you mean your fox-eyed father?" "No, I mean Dad. My honored adoptive father is in the capital, for your information." Lahan's brother fell silent until he smacked the door with abandon. "Get out of here and go home now before they find you. You're terrible. It's been ages since you saw your little brother. You're not my father's son anymore." The conversation sounded vaguely absurd. Maomao opened the lid of the teapot and looked inside. She found not tea leaves but roasted barley. Yes, she thought, impressed. That was one way to use it. So Lahan nonchalantly sipped his drink while his brother raged and ordered him to go home. Maomao meanwhile inspected a vine lying in a corner of the small building. It appeared to be the same thing that was planted in the fields outside. The vine had been clipped off and placed in a bucket. A close look revealed what appeared to be roots. So were they planning to replant it? The leaves really did resemble bindweed, but apparently it was something else. Maomao started going through the shelves. Something about the fields held her attention and wouldn't let it go. She found only buckets and rags on the shelves, so she looked outside through the window. Although the little shed cast a shadow in that direction, she saw pots with young morning glories in them. But it wasn't a morning glory either. There were lots of morning glories out behind the shed. Were they simply for decoration? Or did the family use them to make medicine? Morning glory seeds were known as kyaneusi. People used them as a laxative and a diuretic. However, they could be quite toxic and needed to be handled with care. When Lahan's brother saw Maomao looking out the window, he slammed the window shut. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, just curious about the morning glories. Who the hell are you anyway?" It was a little late for that question. "She is my younger sister, dear brother. I'm a complete stranger, sir." "Which is it?" Lahan's brother clenched his fists. Maomao and Lahan looked at each other. Then Maomao said, "He certainly is easy to get a rise out of." "Right. There aren't many like him. He will actually offer a retort when you want one." "Stop it, I don't understand a word either of you is saying." Lahan's brother stamped his feet. It was truly fun to tease him. Lahan poured more tea from the teapot and offered it to the other man. He drank it down in a single gulp, then flung the cup away. The drink must have been really hot. Maomao went and retrieved the wooden drinking vessel. "Excellent reaction," she said, inspiringly by the book. "Right. You would think the likes of him would be everywhere, but they are surprisingly rare, his type." "Goddammit, I do not understand one word," the brother exclaimed, his tongue popping out of his mouth. "Okay, enough fun at brother's expense. Time to get back to the subject. You seem intent on chasing us out. Might I ask why?" Maomao said. "I understand how you might despise this man for betraying his real family and joining up with that awful fox strategist. You've got it all wrong, little sister. She's pretty much right, but that's not the point." "Pretty much right, brother," Lahan said, genuinely distressed. Had he really not realized? His brother ignored him, looking at Maomao instead. "He said he calls you his little sister." "You are Lahan's girl, then," Maomao replied with a truly dire look. Her brother shivered and shrank back. Maomao, do not look at my dear brother that way, you will give him a heart attack. Don't, Lahan sounded as if he were talking to a child. That annoyed her even more. She looked away from both of them and took another drink of tea. Lahan's brother sat down, his face drawn. He took a few deep breaths to steady himself. He opened his mouth, but Maomao glared at him. He put a hand to his forehead and chose his words carefully. Look, it doesn't really matter who you are. You should get out of here as fast as you can. And if you are who Lahan claims you are, all the more reason. I take it from your tone that this is no small matter, Lahan said. If you understand that, then stop quibbling and go. Being treated like that could only pique a person's curiosity. Lahan's spectacles flashed. Brother, what has happened? It is safest if you do not ask. We just want to know what is going on. Then we will be good and go home. If I tell you, there will be no escape. Brother, Maomao thought, talking like that is going to have exactly the opposite effect you want. As the conversation went on, Lahan kept trying to wheedle out the information he wanted. Maomao suspected he would eventually learn the truth. However, the plot twisted first. The door opened with a clatter, and an elderly man with a cane entered. A middle-aged woman and several servants were with him. I thought I heard a ruckus out here, the woman said. She narrowed her eyes at Maomao and Lahan. Lahan's brother went pale. It has been a long time, Lahan. 3 years, if my memory is not failing me. It has indeed been a long while. Lahan stepped forward and bowed deeply. Mother, grandfather, mother and grandfather, Maomao thought. In other words, these were the family who had been chased out of the capital. The old man looked very stubborn, with a weathered face and long beard. His eyes were deeply set. The woman had a lovely face, but her narrowed eyes reminded Maomao of a predator. She looked much like the woman from the Shi clan, Lulan's mother. She was certainly intimidating. Her outfit was rather loud, and she wore a white bracelet around her wrist. Perhaps she hadn't quite caught up with current fashions. I see you've brought a scruffy little waif with you. Who is this, your maid? The woman asked. It seemed practically obligatory for new acquaintances to ridicule Maomao, and she was used to it by now. She stayed quiet and kept her eyes on the ground. Oh heavens, mother, this is my little sister. Laha, older brother started to cry out, but he slapped his hands over his mouth. Little sister. Are you Lakan's daughter? The old man asked. Maomao continued to look at the ground, but her face showed a scowl. One person there seemed just as offended by the name as Maomao did. It was Lakan's mother. Maomao could even hear her grinding her teeth. Yes, that is right, Lahan volunteered. Even his brother had fixed him with a staggering glare. This was why he had been so intent on getting Lahan and Maomao out of there undiscovered. He had not wanted his mother or grandfather to find them. Maomao agreed with him in that respect. It looked as though life would have been easier if they had never met these people. The old man made a muffled sound. It confused Maomao for a moment before she realized it was laughter. He said, ha 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 ha. How did you hear about it? Lahan looked perplexed. How did we? Maomao wondered, wearing an expression of confusion similar to Lahan's. The others didn't seem to notice, perhaps because she and Lahan both had relatively minimal facial expressions. Unconcerned, the old man continued. If you are here about Lakan, forget it. He is an empty shell of a man. He didn't even resist when we put him in confinement. He just keeps muttering to himself. Frankly, it's unsettling. Wait, confinement? Maomao and Lahan looked at each other. Lahan's brother put a hand to his brow and let out a long sigh. Grandfather, what in the world are you talking about? Lahan asked. Oh, don't play dumb. Your foster father might be eccentric, but you would begin to suspect something when he did not return for 10 whole days. That is why you are here, isn't it? Maomao did not fully understand what was happening, but she understood it sounded troublesome. And if this old man, Lahan's grandfather, was to be believed, that Freak was in confinement somewhere. Not that she could believe it. 10 whole days does not mean much to us, grandfather. Maomao and I have both been away from the capital for more than a month now, Lahan said, scratching the back of his neck. The old man slowly turned to look at Maomao. You're kidding. Maomao took a small box from their luggage. She opened it to reveal a pot with a most unusual plant inside. It was the little cactus she had received. You won't find these around here, at least not yet, she said. They had gooseberry jam and a few other things as well, but she thought a shapeless piece of food would not be as revealing. She added, "We also have furs and silks." Lahan's mother and grandfather stared at the plant. They had never seen anything quite like it before. "Yes, it was something that convincingly said souvenir from the West." Grandfather repeated, "You're kidding." Lahan said, "Why should we lie to you?" He continued, "We brought cigars too. Would you like some?" He also opened some of the luggage. Tobacco leaves were typically imported and were quite a luxury item in the capital. However, in the West they could be had cheaply. Mother and grandfather looked at each other silently. At length grandfather swept one hand upward. "Get them." The servant standing behind him advanced on Maomao and Lahan. They were shortly captured, still a little stupefied. How could this have happened? How could they lock me up? "Me, I thought I was family." "I think you mean a traitor." "How rude," Lahan said and sat down in a chair. They were indeed locked up, but it was a fairly ordinary room. The furniture was old but sturdy, and the place was respectably clean. Maomao knew this because she had run a finger along the shelves and windowsills, looking for dust as a cruel mother-in-law might. She hadn't found any. Still, Maomao said, there were many mysteries here. If Lahan's grandfather was to be believed, that strange man was somewhere in this mansion, also under lock and key. He might be lackadaisical to a fault, but Maomao wasn't sure he would have let himself be apprehended so easily. "Do you think that old man is telling the truth?" Maomao asked. Lahan scratched at his tousled hair. "It's possible he is. What about the old man?" "Maomao, there is something I haven't told you," Lahan said quite suddenly. "The courtesan he purchased from the Verdigris house last year was not in the best of health." "I suppose not." The woman had already appeared as if she might die at any moment. And who would buy this expiring wisp of a courtesan but the eccentric strategist? That is why my honoured foster father did not come on this trip. Was that why Rikyusen had been so insistent that Maomao should go to the strategist's place? Maomao leaned on the windowsill. The window had wooden bars on it and did not appear to offer much chance of escape. Past the bars she could see farmers working in the fields. What in the world were they growing out there? Father rarely regarded people as people. But after he welcomed that courtesan into his home, he changed dramatically. It was embarrassing to see, quite frankly. Oh, they played Go and shogi every day. They played Go more often, I suppose. This was bad news when he had to go out to work. He would take a board diagram with him. After he made a move, a messenger would be sent back to the house. The messenger would put the stone on the board, then the responding move would be recorded. Finally, the messenger would come back to court. Again and again. Yes, Maomao saw that would indeed be annoying. She felt for the messenger. The messenger was always quite busy right up until the turn of the year. After that he found himself with more and more free time. "Whatever you think you're getting at, it has nothing to do with me." She did not believe the eccentric strategist would simply let himself be captured, carted off from a courtesan he felt so strongly about. It was simply her time. She had probably lived longer than she would have if she had remained in the pleasure district. Perhaps that thought was what allowed Maomao to appear so calm. To others she might have seemed cold, but when you worked in medicine you often saw people dying. If you spent all your time weeping you would never reach the next patient. She thought some people did shed tears every time though. Some people, even when they could have adjusted, never did. Some never learned to simply accept things. Her adoptive father was one of them. She considered him inept and stupid, but that was precisely why she respected him so much. Was it nothing to do with him? Do not be so bleak. If that courtesan did die, I do not believe even my honoured foster father could endure the shock. And you think they used that opportunity to bring him here? It was a ridiculous idea. In spite of it all, the old freak was a high official. If he were to go missing for 10 days, many people would be concerned, not just his adopted son. When Maomao mentioned this, Lahan responded, he took 2 weeks off work when he bought out his courtesan. And when he returned, there was still hardly any work waiting for him. He needed to earn his living, or everyone else needed to admit that they didn't actually need him. The point is this: as long as everyone else was doing their jobs, they could probably continue to function for a good 6 months before anyone noticed he was gone, short of an outright crisis. Honestly. Why doesn't the emperor simply dismiss him? Maomao began to worry that perhaps the strategist had some sort of advantage over the ruler. Or maybe it was simply because this unusual man was so skilled at selecting talented subordinates. It sounds a little incomplete to me. Our courtier's simply a lazier and sloppier bunch than I believed. All I can say to that is, well, he is my father. Maomao heaved a sigh. If I had to guess, I would say grandfather and the others have locked father up. They hope to make the family headship appear vacant and thereby have it given to them. Lahan said family politics are not really her thing. How do they decide who gets to be head of the clan? She had heard that the old freak had stolen the family headship from Lahan's grandfather, but she didn't understand the specifics. Perhaps there was some kind of paperwork involved, something that showed who owned what. Typically, among the named clans, there is an object that is passed down along with the name.